You ever wake up, look out your window, and see a giant warehouse built on your land, without permission? Yeah, that happened to me. And let me tell you, it was just the beginning of one of the craziest battles I've ever faced. I'd always dreamed of owning a quiet piece of land somewhere remote, somewhere where neighbors didn't peek over fences or argue about lawn height. After years of city life and endless meetings, I finally made it happen. I found a 10-acre wooded lot at the edge of Pinehill Ridge, an old ranch property with a rundown log cabin that most folks had forgotten about. But I saw peace, opportunity, and freedom. The best part? It wasn't part of any HOA. I checked thoroughly. The deed made that clear. I didn't want anyone telling me how to paint my door, mow my lawn, or when I could use my barbecue grill. That was non-negotiable. I signed the paperwork, paid in full, and moved in that spring. I spent the first couple months renovating the cabin. Fixing up the roof, clearing brush, and installing solar panels. It was work, but the kind that feeds the soul. A couple neighbors from the next hill came by and introduced themselves. Mostly polite folks. Except one woman. Her name was Karen. And if there were ever a living, breathing stereotype of a controlling HOA queen, it was her. From the first time she showed up uninvited on my porch, she made her intentions clear. "You'll need to attend the HOA meeting next Thursday," she said with a smirk, like it was already decided. I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not in the HOA," I told her. "This property's separate. Not part of the subdivision." She gave a fake little laugh. "Oh, that's cute. But everything on this ridge falls under our coverage now. The board approved it last year." She handed me a newsletter with a list of rules about approved fencing, noise restrictions, paint colors, even a curfew for yard work. I handed it right back. "I'm not interested," I said, shutting the door. That should have been the end of it. But over the next few weeks, she kept showing up. Complaining about my firewood stack, saying my truck lowered neighborhood appeal, and warning me that unregistered residents could be fined. I ignored her. Then I left town for 2 weeks on business. I didn't think much of it. I had security cameras installed and a caretaker friend who swung by to check the place once. But when I came back, everything changed. It was early morning. I pulled off the gravel road onto my driveway, and slammed the brakes. Something was blocking my path. A giant warehouse. Steel walls. Easily 20 feet high. Gray siding, big garage doors, fluorescent lighting. It looked like a commercial storage facility. On my land. I stepped out of my truck, mouth hanging open. My gravel road had been torn up and replaced with fresh asphalt leading to this building. My fire pit? Flattened. A few small trees had been completely uprooted. The back half of my property, gone under concrete. And right there, nailed to a metal post. HOA storage unit, private access only. Trespassers will be fined. I actually stood there for 10 minutes trying to process what I was seeing. I walked the perimeter of the warehouse, checking every door. All locked. But I knew without a doubt, I hadn't given permission for this. No one had contacted me. There were no permits, no letters, no agreements. So I drove straight down the hill to Karen's house. When she opened the door, she acted like I was interrupting a spa day. She was sipping something pink and fruity, dressed in a bathrobe, and wearing oversized sunglasses even though it was cloudy. "Oh. You're back," she said sweetly. "We thought you'd abandoned the property." "Abandoned?" I asked, trying to control my voice. "You built a warehouse on my land." "Well, the board voted," she said, smiling. "We needed a central storage unit for tools, mowers, snowblowers, you know, HOA maintenance equipment. That property was just sitting there. The board reallocated it." I stared at her. You don't have any legal authority over that land. You don't own it. You didn't lease it. And I sure as hell didn't agree to anything. She shrugged like it was no big deal. You weren't using the back half. And we offered to include your parcel in the HOA officially, but you never responded to our letter. So, under Clause 4C in our expansion policy, we considered it forfeited. Forfeited? I repeated. Lady, this isn't a monopoly game. That land is mine. I pay taxes on it. I have the deed. You have no claim. That's when her tone changed. She crossed her arms. Look, if you don't want to be part of the community, that's your choice. But you're outnumbered. We've got 50 voting members, and you're just one guy. Think carefully before starting a war you can't win. She closed the door in my face. I stood there in shock. Not only had she trespassed and constructed a massive building on land that wasn't hers. She actually believed she was entitled to it. Like she was doing me a favor. That's when I realized something chilling. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a full-blown land theft operation, and Karen was ready to bulldoze over anyone who got in her way. I got back in my truck, heart pounding. This wasn't going to be solved with polite conversations. This was war. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the cabin, lights off, phone in hand, staring out the window toward that giant warehouse that wasn't supposed to be there. Every few minutes, I'd refresh the deed and property records online, just to reassure myself I wasn't crazy. My name was still on everything. The boundaries hadn't changed. That steel monster was on my land, plain and simple. By morning, I had a plan. I called a local surveyor I knew and asked him to come out immediately. I also contacted the county zoning office and requested an emergency review. Within 24 hours, I had a full team out at the property, me, a certified land surveyor, a county official with a badge and a clipboard, and my lawyer, who had just finished his coffee and was already fuming. We walked the boundaries with flags, measuring tape, and GPS devices. Sure enough, the warehouse was over 60% on my land, with some of its concrete foundation even crossing into a protected stream buffer. That meant serious environmental violations on top of the property crime. Karen must have seen us from her deck, because it didn't take long for her to roll up in her HOA-branded golf cart like a dictator pulling up to a coup. She hopped out with 2 other board members, equally smug, equally clueless. "What's going on here?" she snapped, marching toward us like she owned the place. The zoning officer stepped in. "We're performing an official boundary assessment. You're welcome to observe but stay behind the flag line." Karen crossed her arms and smirked. "This is all unnecessary. The HOA expansion passed unanimously. We've used this land for months. It's practically common ground now." My lawyer turned to her with the kind of smirk only a man holding a thick folder full of legal evidence can wear. "Actually," he said, flipping open the file, "this is private land, purchased legally by my client. Here's the county deed, the parcel ID, and an aerial survey from 6 months ago. Your expansion is meaningless without legal transfer." Karen blinked. "No, that's wrong. Our HOA map clearly shows this property included in our boundaries." The zoning officer raised an eyebrow. "May I see that map?" She handed it over with confidence, until he frowned. "This isn't a county-issued map. This was drawn up by your HOA and never submitted to or approved by the county." Karen looked like she had just swallowed a cactus. I stepped forward. "So let's be clear. You tore up my trees. You destroyed my fire pit. You poured concrete and built a warehouse, all without a single permit or my permission. And now you want to pretend I'm the problem?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. My lawyer handed her a packet. "Cease and desist. Effective immediately." Any further activity on this property will be considered criminal trespass. But Karen, being Karen, wasn't ready to back down. She scoffed and said, "We'll fight this. We have lawyers, too. This won't go your way." And with that, she turned around and stormed off, her two bored minions trailing behind like confused mall cops. But I wasn't naive. I knew Karen wouldn't let this go. She'd already crossed so many lines, I had no doubt she'd try something shady next. So I took it a step further. That afternoon, I had new security cameras installed, motion-triggered, high-res, night vision, and all synced to my phone. I also changed the locks on the cabin and installed reinforced deadbolts. Then I got a friend in the county office to keep an eye out for any sneaky permit filings or alterations involving my property. I was preparing for war, and sure enough, Karen struck back sooner than I expected. 3 days later, I drove up to the cabin and noticed something new pinned to the front door. A notice. An eviction notice, on my own property. Notice of reclamation, per HOA Clause 7b, the above structure is deemed abandoned. The HOA will reclaim and repurpose it in accordance with community standards. They were trying to steal my cabin. I ripped the notice down and checked the cameras. That's when I saw the footage, Karen and 2 HOA board members, dressed in black hoodies, creeping up my porch just before dawn, hammer in hand, pinning the document like they were in some twisted secret mission. That was all I needed. I called the sheriff. Deputy Burns, a no-nonsense type who'd dealt with HOA disputes before, reviewed the footage and took down the details. "Looks like you've got yourself a classic case of land encroachment and attempted theft," he said, chewing gum as he scrolled through my camera feed. "And if they forged official-looking eviction paperwork? That's fraud." He told me to sit tight and let him handle it. But Karen wouldn't sit still. The very next night, she came back. Except this time, she wasn't trying to leave notes, she was trying to break in. She brought bolt cutters, a flashlight, and someone filming with a phone. It was clear what the plan was. Stage a video showing the cabin abandoned, get footage of themselves walking in, and use it as evidence for the HOA to take full possession. But what she didn't know was that Deputy Burns had set up a mobile surveillance van in the woods that night, watching live. As soon as Karen stepped onto the porch, the lights flashed. The sheriff's team came out of the trees like a SWAT raid. She screamed. They didn't even need to chase her. They had the footage. The forged documents. The boundary violations. The environmental damage. And now, attempted illegal entry. As they cuffed her, she yelled, "You can't arrest me. I run this neighborhood." Deputy Burns just smiled and said, "Not anymore." Karen was arrested on the spot and hauled off in the back of a sheriff's cruiser. But even as the red and blue lights disappeared into the woods, I knew this wasn't over. The warehouse was still standing. My land was still torn up. My peace was shattered. And Karen had dragged me into a mess that went deeper than I imagined. The next morning, I sat down with my lawyer to plan the next phase. We weren't just talking criminal charges anymore, we were talking civil damages, injunctions, and a full property rights lawsuit. What Karen and her HOA had done wasn't just arrogant. It was illegal, reckless, and costly. First step. File for a temporary restraining order against the entire HOA board. That would prevent them from stepping foot on my property or even accessing the warehouse. Within 2 days, the court granted it. The warehouse was padlocked under county supervision, and the HOA members were barred from touching a single brick. Next, we compiled evidence for the civil case. Survey documents proving the warehouse sat on my land. Photographs and videos of the construction equipment trespassing. Footage of Karen admitting she reallocated the land. Screenshots of the forged HOA map. The eviction notice she posted on my cabin door. My lawyer called it one of the most blatant property violations he'd ever seen. And the court seemed to agree. The judge issued a preliminary ruling within a week. Karen and the HOA had no rightful claim to any part of my land, and the warehouse had been illegally constructed. But then we found something even more explosive. Buried in the HOA's budget reports, documents we subpoenaed through the court, was a line item labeled Emergency Storage Facility Funds. The money had come directly from HOA members' dues, tens of thousands of dollars. Not only had they used illegal labor, but they also misappropriated funds, failed to disclose construction plans, and falsified permit filings to avoid city inspections. What Karen had done wasn't just a bad neighbor move. It was fraud, embezzlement, and environmental violation rolled into one. That opened the door to another level of consequences. The county launched its own investigation. The Department of Building and Safety got involved. Code enforcement inspectors came out. Turns out, the warehouse wasn't even built to spec. No fire suppression system. No ventilation. No ADA access. It was a liability nightmare. And the best part? Because it sat on my land, I legally owned it. You see, under adverse possession and real estate improvement laws in our county, any structure permanently affixed to your land without contract or agreement becomes your property, even if someone else paid for it. Karen had unknowingly gifted me a steel warehouse. But I didn't want it. Not like that. Not full of stolen HOA equipment and bad blood. So we filed for forfeiture. The court gave the HOA 30 days to remove all contents from the warehouse or it would be legally seized. Problem? They couldn't. With Karen under criminal charges and the rest of the board under investigation, the HOA was paralyzed. No one wanted to touch anything. Especially not when it was being considered evidence in a fraud case. And then the residents started turning. I started getting phone calls. First one. Then another. Then a flood. HOA members begging me to drop the lawsuit, telling me they never agreed to the warehouse, that Karen had tricked them, threatened them, bullied them into silence. One woman named Linda cried over the phone. She said it was already approved. That it wouldn't cost more than a few hundred. But our dues went up, and she never showed us anything. She said you were just some squatter. Squatter? That was the lie she'd spread around. That I didn't even own the cabin. That I was just camping illegally on abandoned HOA land. Turns out, Karen had been gaslighting the whole neighborhood. So I did something unexpected. I held a town meeting. Right outside the warehouse. I laid it all out, the real maps, the deed, the court ruling, the footage, the arrest. I told the residents the truth, not just what Karen had done to me, but what she'd done to them. Misused their money. Lied to their faces. Dragged them into lawsuits and criminal investigations. And at the end of it, I said something that surprised even me. If you want to dissolve the HOA and start over as a voluntary association, one that respects property lines and personal freedom, I'll support you. Heck, I'll help you. But if you want war, I'll finish it. And I won't lose. The crowd was silent. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then a full round of applause. Karen had ruled that neighborhood for 10 years. In 1 month, she had destroyed it all. But I wasn't finished yet. With court approval, I filed a motion to have the warehouse officially transferred to my name. Not just the structure, but the slab, the wiring, everything. And the judge granted it. Just like that, I became the accidental owner of a commercial-grade facility, built by the enemy, paid for by my attackers, and handed over like a trophy in a war they started. With the warehouse now legally mine, and Karen awaiting trial, I stood on my porch one cool Friday morning, looking across the land I had fought so hard to protect. The morning sun hit the metal siding just right, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. What started as a quiet life in the woods had turned into a legal brawl, a land war, and a complete takedown of one of the most arrogant HOAs in the county. But in the end, I'd not only defended what was mine, I'd walked away with more than I started with. A few days after the court granted me the warehouse, a county contractor came by to inspect the structure. "This thing's in pretty good shape," he said, walking through with a clipboard. "Little rough on code, but fixable. Could be worth a small fortune." He was right. With some modifications and a few permits, the warehouse could easily be leased out, maybe to a local landscaping company or county maintenance division. I made a few calls and within 2 weeks, I had a tenant lined up. Irony? It was a county road crew. So now, the very government that arrested Karen was paying me monthly rent, on a building she illegally built. The HOA, meanwhile, was collapsing under its own weight. Once Karen's arrest hit local news, more residents came forward with complaints. One man showed records of inflated fines she had personally pocketed. Another proved that she used HOA funds to remodel her own kitchen, calling it a community dining upgrade. The final straw was when a hidden bank account surfaced with over $18,000 that no one on the board knew about, except Karen. She was hit with 12 separate charges, ranging from criminal trespass and property destruction to embezzlement, fraud, and document forgery. At her arraignment, she tried to play innocent, blaming her board and even me, claiming I had entrapped her. The judge wasn't buying it. She was denied bail. The court called her a flight risk and manipulative threat to property owners. And with every new witness, every new document dug up, her sentence grew longer. The DA even floated racketeering charges, arguing that Karen had weaponized the HOA as a personal empire. But as for me, I didn't chase revenge. I didn't need to. The law had already done what I couldn't, removed a tyrant and given me justice. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. With the rental income from the warehouse, I hired a landscaping crew to restore my property. We replanted trees, cleaned out the stream buffer, rebuilt the fire pit, and fixed the gravel road. I even upgraded the cabin porch and installed solar-powered motion lights, because I wasn't taking any chances ever again. Neighbors who once avoided me now waved as they passed. Some brought over pies or asked about renting space in the warehouse. Others simply thanked me, for standing up, for not folding, and for exposing the truth. And I couldn't help but wonder, how many other HOAs are out there like this one? How many people just give in when someone like Karen tries to intimidate them with fake rules and threats? I almost did. I almost packed up and left when I saw that warehouse. I almost gave up when she posted that eviction notice. But I didn't. I fought. And I won. And now? Now I own it all, the cabin, the trees, the land, and the warehouse Karen thought she could steal. It's funny, really. She tried to erase me from this property. Tried to take everything. But all she did, was build more for me. So the next time someone tells you you're outnumbered, or that you can't fight the system, remember my story. Because sometimes, the best revenge, is owning everything they tried to take.